Hi guys, it's Jonathan from Smart Home Sounds here. We're a home audio company who specialise in helping customers find the right speakers for them. This is the first part of an exciting new ceiling speaker series which aims to tackle all the questions you might have about ceiling speakers, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next part, all about specific brands and types. Today's all about giving you an insight into ceiling speakers so you can determine if they're going to be the right sort of thing for you. We're going to cover what the benefits of them are, how they're installed, and also explain what to look out for in a ceiling speaker. Ceiling speakers are growing in popularity and actually becoming the go-to solution for something like a home extension, a renovation, or a new build. Ceiling speakers have come a long way in recent years, and it used to be that you'd have to go over to the amplifier that would be powering them and switch a few buttons and then get the music started. But since the introduction of wireless control, that means that you can actually use an app on your phone, or you can use Bluetooth or Wi-Fi to get the music started without even having to go over to the amplifier. So that means that you can combine the convenience of wireless control into a ceiling speaker with the aesthetics of it as well. So building on the point about aesthetics, thankfully they don't look like this when you install them in the ceiling. They all do come with a white grille that in some cases you can simply magnetically clip onto the ceiling speaker like this one. And then that is the finished result of what your ceiling speaker would look like, so very aesthetically pleasing. Now, they do come in white, so it's designed to match the decor of your room. But of course, if you did want to spray paint them to match the ceiling even more, then you can do that. Just make sure that you're using the right type of spray paint. Another benefit about using ceiling speakers is that they don't take up any space in your room. So as you might agree, it's much easier to find space in the ceiling than it is something like the wall, the floor, or on a shelf. You're also not limited for space as to where to position the ceiling speakers. So unlike tower speakers where you might have to find space amongst your furniture, ceiling speakers can be installed in the ceiling and it's more of a blank canvas, so you've got more room to play with. So now let's talk about how ceiling speakers actually work. So there's two different types of ceiling speakers that you can buy, active or passive. Now these are all passive ceiling speakers, and what that means is that they need to be powered by a separate amplifier via speaker cable. And as most audio enthusiasts would agree, that opens you up to better sound quality and better flexibility. Now with active ceiling speakers, the difference with those is that they have the amplifier already built into the speaker, meaning you don't need any speaker cable or a separate amplifier to power them. So in terms of actually installing the speaker, all ceiling speakers come with the cutout template, which is what you'll use as a guide when you're cutting out the perfect size hole in the ceiling. So you'll cut round this template here and then you'll have a nice hole in the ceiling. These particular ceiling speakers are passive, so as I mentioned earlier, they require speaker cable connected to an amplifier. So here, I'll just try and find the binding post. So there, you'll take your speaker cable, and this one is the 16 gauge 2-core speaker cable, which is the sort of industry standard. You'll wire the red to the red and the black to the black. And once that's installed, in terms of actually fixing the ceiling speaker in the ceiling, this particular ceiling speaker has a tri-grip mounting system, so there's 3 screws that you need to screw into the ceiling to keep it up. And then once it's up, you just need to undo these clamps and then they sit in the ceiling. Now, as I mentioned earlier, these are passive ceiling speakers which do require the use of a separate amplifier. So we've got the Sonos amp here, and how this would work is quite similar to how you would have wired the speaker cable to the ceiling speaker. You take the other end of the speaker cable and you'll wire the black strand to the black terminal and the red strand to the red terminal. Just bear in mind which speaker, if you're using a left and a right stereo pair, so a left and a right speaker, you want to bear in mind which speaker is going to be the left and which speaker is going to be the right, because these are assigned as the left and the right channels. Now, if you don't have the facility to wire speaker cable behind the walls and the ceilings, then you will need to opt for the active speaker, what I mentioned earlier, which has the amplifier built into the ceiling speaker. One thing to bear in mind though is that that would still require mains power, so you would need to think about how you're going to run mains power to it, either via a lighting circuit or via a power socket. So there is another choice when it comes to ceiling speakers as well, and that is mono versus single stereo ceiling speakers. So an example of a mono speaker would be these two here, and they would be designed to be set up as a dedicated left and a right stereo pair. Now this is great if you've got space in the ceiling for them, because you're going to get a really nice stereo separation effect because you've got a dedicated speaker for your left and dedicated speaker for your right channels. Now, if your room is, say, less than 4 by 4 meters, very roughly, then you may want to start considering what's called a single stereo ceiling speaker. Now, as you can see, it's got 2 tweeters in one ceiling speaker, and they act as a left and a right channel built in, so you're not losing out on the stereo separation. But do keep in mind that the stereo separation effect will be more when you have a dedicated left and a right speaker as opposed to a single stereo. It's very important to note that these left and right speakers cannot be used on their own in a room, so you wouldn't want to have just a left or a right speaker in one room, because then you would only be receiving half the audio. So if you're intending to install just one ceiling speaker in a room, you would have to use the single stereos with the dual tweeters there. So depending on how you like your speakers to sound, size also does have an impact in which ceiling speaker you should go for. So the standard size is the 6.5 inch speakers we have here. Now when we talk about size, we are talking about the driver size, not about the actual hole that you cut out in the ceiling. So those are your standards. Now you can go higher or lower than this. So for example, you can get 3.5 inch size drivers, which are about half the size of the standard 6.5 inch size. They're designed to sort of replicate spotlights. Now those are nowhere near as good as the standard size in terms of sound quality. They're more for vocals and radio. So if that's your sort of thing, then those might suit you. You can also go larger than the standard model, and those would be the 8 inch size model. So as you can see, they are slightly larger, and they do give a better bass response than the standard 6.5 inch. Of course, they do take up slightly more space in the ceiling though, so do factor that in as well. You'll also need to consider how much space you have in your ceiling void, as that will determine how slim you'll need your ceiling speakers to be. Now we've got the standard sort of depth here of about 100 millimeters. That's sort of how much you'll need on average in your ceiling void. Now you can get ceiling speaker models that go as low as 36 millimeters in depth, but of course those are a little bit more expensive because they've got to get the same amount of sound quality from them, but in a tighter space. You can also get ceiling speakers which come with a sealed protective enclosure, also known as a back box. Now unfortunately we don't have any of those with us today, but the main benefits to be aware of is the fact that they can not only improve sound quality and the consistency of sound, but they also prevent any sound from leaking above. So it's ideal if you've got a bedroom above where you don't want to keep people awake when you're listening to music, or if you just want to improve the sound quality of the speaker. But do be aware that does come at a premium price point, so just consider how much of a benefit this will be for you. Some ceiling speakers also come with angleable tweeters, and what that means is you can actually direct the sound to the room's most habitable areas. So for example, if you're maybe using a left and a right ceiling speaker in a surround sound scenario, you can position the tweeters so they're sort of pointing towards the edges of your sofa. Or if you've got maybe an awkwardly shaped room, you can then have the freedom to position the tweeter to where you want it to be. Now a great tip is if you're using a single stereo ceiling speaker, for example, which have dual tweeters, you can actually position the tweeters and tilt them away from each other, which means you're getting the very best dispersion of sound for that ceiling speaker. Now, if you're thinking of installing a ceiling speaker in your bathroom or maybe an outdoor area, you will need to consider the IP rating of the ceiling speaker, and that means how resistant it is to certain elements, such as steam, moisture, humidity, hot and cold temperatures, and water. So if you're installing maybe a ceiling speaker in the corner of your bathroom that's not going to be in a shower enclosure or over a bathtub, then you might want to consider something like an IP44 rated ceiling speaker, which is simply resistant to steam, moisture and humidity. But if you're installing a ceiling speaker within a shower enclosure, above a bathtub or in an outdoor area, you will need to install an IP65 rated ceiling speaker, which means it's fully resistant to water and all the other elements as well. Now let's tackle the question of how many ceiling speakers are required for each room. This is always a tough question to answer because no floor plan is going to be the same, but as a general rule, if you have space to install a left and a right stereo pair, then definitely do so, because that is going to give you a better stereo separation effect. So to give you a sort of general idea, if the space between each speaker is going to be less than 2 meters, roughly, then start to consider a single stereo ceiling speaker positioned in the center of the ceiling. So for any rooms that are less than say 4x4, just as an average, then the single stereo ceiling speaker would be a better fit. Now for larger size rooms, for example, an open plan area, like a large open plan extension, or maybe a large living room, you're going to want to start considering multiple pairs of left and right speakers. Now you can sort of play around with the size of them to match your sort of listening habits. So you can maybe have 2 pairs of left and right, sort of 6.5-inch ceiling speakers, or maybe you would just prefer to opt for 1 pair of larger 8-inch size speakers for the better bass. It's entirely up to you. But really, it does depend on every single floor plan. In terms of positioning the ceiling speakers, it really is entirely up to you, but we do see lots of installs where the ceiling speakers have been positioned around the key points of the room. So that might be a seating area or a kitchen island, for example. So hopefully this video has given you a good insight into whether ceiling speakers are going to be the right sort of thing for you. And if so, has helped you to become a bit more familiar with the sort of things to look out for in a ceiling speaker. If you've got an upcoming project, maybe you're planning an extension or a new build that's going to be utilising ceiling speakers, then we're always happy to help you out. If you think ceiling speakers are the right sort of thing for you, then be sure to subscribe and check out the rest of the ceiling speaker series. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.